Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Nicole.
And I'm your host, Jacqueline. You're listening to the first season of Perfictionist. So I think today what we're going to do for this heavy spoilers discussion is rather than going through, like the plot like we normally do, I think we're just going to talk about some very interesting points, and we're just going to go ahead and assume like you've read the book at this point. This is like a pretty long book. So I think that if we did do the plot points like how we did for the Throne of Glass series, it would probably have to be cut up into several episodes. So we're just going to like touch on the most interesting stuff and maybe talk about a few theories and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And the book in question, as you probably will know by the title of the video or episode you're listening to, is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, and it is the second book in the Empyrean series. So speaking of the title of the book being Iron Flame, I think that there's like a double meaning behind Iron Flame. And I don't know, very early on in the book, we find out that Violet Squad is like considered the Iron Squad because they have the most surviving people. And we also know that they're in the Flame section. So immediately my thought was like, oh, Iron Flame. They're the Iron Squad in the Flame section. I was like, oh, clever. Every time she names a book, she also like kind of describes her like Violet standing within the college, because like Fourth Wing, she was placed in Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, so like maybe the titles of the book kind of give us an idea of sort of like Violet standing. And then later on in the book, we find out something completely different about the title.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of cool. Like the little dual meanings there. If I was her and I came up with that idea for my book, I'd be like, it is genius.
Yeah,
Works
I'd be
in
like
more
so
ways
stoked.
than one. Yeah.
I love it when things have more than one meaning or like can be seen in more than one way.
Yeah, totally. Me too.
At what point did you kind of just like realize that the mistranslation of flame being like because originally she thought it was rain, and then Dane's like, no, that actually means flame. Did you put that together right away? Or
No.
did it take you? No.
I had to
like,
wait for Rebecca to spell it out for me.
Yeah. I think it's nice that she gives like, and this is something that's pretty consistent, I feel, is she'll give hints on things that are pretty small, and I think you really need to be paying attention to pick up on some of them.
Yeah.
But then eventually she will kind of put the pieces together so you're not confused forever. So if you don't if you're not like a super detective, then it's not like you're left in the dark being like, what was that?
I know. When it was actually spelled out, I was like, duh. I felt so stupid. I actually went back and looked, and I was like, oh, I just wasn't, I don't know, paying attention or whatever. But I love the way it came together, and that was cool.
Yeah, no, it kind of made the meeting even more powerful when you realize that it has to do with like the wards and everything. So
yeah,
I definitely thought that was really cool and like just really shocking, because I already had thought I had figured out the title, and I was like, oh wait, of course there's always something more.
Yeah, I loved it. So Xaden and Violet's relationship, let's just talk about it right now. We won't jump to the end just yet, but yeah.
It's a very controversial.
They spent a lot of time fighting in this story.
They do spend a lot of time fighting in this story, and I don't hate it. I know lots of people do. I know lots of people are like that's kind of the thing about this book that they absolutely despise, and we're like either couldn't finish it or we're like, I'm not going to continue the series. And lots of people seem to mention the state of the relationship. But like this book only takes course over 4 months. And I have to believe that if I was lied to that severely and continued to be lied to over and over and over again, that I would be having the same fight for 4 or 6 months, however long it's been in the story. I'm like, I think that is perfectly reasonable that they have not worked through this yet.
I think it's reasonable too. I did find it a little bit tiresome towards the end. I was kind of starting to feel tired of all the arguing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming a lot of the rest of the fandom was starting to feel that argument fatigue as well. But like I don't disagree with the fact that they were arguing. I completely get it. Like Violet
Mm-hmm.
has every right to be very angry, and I think if it wasn't for the fact that their dragons were like bonded and mated, it would be like a simple breakup situation could happen. But the fact that
Yeah.
their dragons are like bonded and mated, they're constantly being thrown together and they have that connection, that extra connection.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like something they can't exactly get out of, I feel. So
Yeah, and I do feel like it's more than just the dragons in the sense that they seem very connected to each other. Like she refers to him, like Violet refers to Xaden as being her gravity so
mhm.
often. Like he is the center of everything. She is pulled to him in a way that she can't fight. And I feel like
Yeah.
there's more to like it's not a normal relationship. There is something else
Mm,
going on between them, and
yeah.
they can't get away from each other, even if they wanted
Yeah.
to.
The way it's described is very fated mate vibes. Like it's like, and it kind of reminds me of, um, oh, can't say it because that'll spoil something for you. But it reminds me of like the idea of fated mates being um, fated for each other. They can't
Hmm.
escape that, whether they want it or not.
Hmm.
You know, and obviously they both want to be together, but there's this big insurmountable challenge of the constant deceptions and stuff like that. It's a
Yeah.
pretty serious problem.
Hmm. And I think kind of speaking to like how they can't get away from it, even if they wanted to, I think that kind of brings up this idea of like, is this relationship a toxic relationship? And lots of people are saying like this is a glorification of a toxic relationship. And I feel like there's a few things to remember as readers. And the first is this is not a relationship guide. No one is telling you that this is the type of relationship you should strive to have. This is a
Mhm.
fantasy book written for your entertainment. So I think people
Yeah.
kind of get caught up.
If all books didn't do something controversial or interesting, if all relationships were super healthy and essentially peaceful and boring, we wouldn't be interested in reading about them. So I think
Hmm.
that that is a ridiculous, an absolutely ridiculous criticism. Like
I feel your
obviously
passion.
it's toxic. Like it's just ridiculous. It's fiction, it's fantasy, and it
Hmm.
wouldn't be interesting if there wasn't something controversial about it.
Yeah. Thank you. Very well put. And it's like straight up acknowledged in the book. No one's trying to hide this from anybody. Like Mira straight up says your relationship is toxic. And Violet's not like, "Oh no, it's not." Like it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
I'm not perpetuating that I think it's a something that it should be modeled after any relationship. No
no.
way. It's horrible. It's toxic. But that's what makes it interesting to read about.
Hmm.
Come on.
There's a difference between
Jeez.
enjoying somebody else living a, certain lifestyle knowing that it is made up fantasy versus
Mhm.
what you would like wish upon. Like, I would be right there with Mira. If my sister was in a relationship that looked like that, I'd be like, girl, this is toxic. You need to get out.
Yeah,
But
totally.
this isn't real life. And
No.
I do appreciate that it is acknowledged not only by Mira, but by Xaden and Violet. Like, at one point, Violet's like, there's a thin line between devotion and obsession. And she goes on and like names a whole bunch of other things, saying, like, this relationship is like such a fine line and we often cross it.
Mhm.
And like both of them acknowledge that, like that it is not necessarily healthy the way that they are
Yeah, but
infatuated.
mentioning like how you said the line that they're often crossing, that is what makes it an interesting relationship to read about. You know, if they
Hmm.
had, like I said, like a peaceful, healthy relationship, every time their interactions came up, I'd be like skipping through, and so would many other people. And that is,
Hmm.
you know, like I say, they're arguing, they're arguing their argumentative tendencies started to wear on me towards the end of the book. I think because you kind of want to start to see some kind of resolution. Let's move on to a different problem. I think the fact that we were hammering on about the same thing over and over and over again, it was getting tiresome for me personally.
I 100% agreed. In my notes, the very last time they kind of had a major argument before the end battle, I was like, this is the first time I feel as though I'm over this conversation. Like, I get why they're still having it. Like I mentioned earlier, like realistically, this conversation would be had with a couple going through this multiple times over the course, like a long course of time. However, as a reader, I was like, okay, I am done with this now. I do hope that we move on to something different. I hope that this dynamic doesn't continue into the next book. I wasn't mad about it here, but I am ready to move on to something different now.
Don't think it can, considering how the book ended. They have bigger problems now.
Yes, they certainly do. One last thing about the relationship. I saw a lot of people super, super upset about Xaden's whole ask me anything. Like, I will tell you any answer, but you need to ask the right question. And yes, I can see how that would be incredibly frustrating. It's like, I shouldn't have to find the right question in order for you to answer it. However, I do think this has to do, perhaps, this is like a theory, to do with his second signet that we find out about. And I wonder if it's sort of a level of consent, like, because he knows what she wants him to say, because he can tell her intention. Yeah. So I wonder if he just doesn't want to take away her right to be able to ask him to share information. Because if he just if he wanted to, he could literally give her every answer he wanted to because he knows what she wants. But then he's not giving her the choice to ask for what she truly wants, if that makes sense.
That completely makes sense. That's that puts a completely different spin on my view of Xaden. I like that, actually.
Yeah, because he just seems a lot like he's very into consent.
Yeah,
even with their relationship at the beginning, I won't kiss you until you ask me to. And for a very long time into the book, he literally would just stand there and wait until she voiced. And eventually they got to a place where he knew she was okay with it and they were more in a relationship again. But yeah, I don't know. I just think he's really big on giving her autonomy over what she truly wants happening to her or being told to her.
Yeah, what information she's ready or not ready to hear.
Sometimes you want to know something, but you're not ready.
Yeah. I feel like she thinks she's ready to know everything, though. And I think that's what's she's feeling so frustrated about. She's tired of having everything held back.
Yeah, I think she's very conflicted. Because in some sentences or some of her thoughts, she's like, I want to know it all. And then in others, she's afraid of what the answer will mean.
Totally. I totally agree.
Which is very fair.
Yeah. So, those little excerpts at the top of each chapter. I paid special attention. Yes, special attention to them this time. And I feel like I didn't do that in Fourth Wing. And now I'm those are pretty important. And they are super important. So Jacinia, is that how we're saying her name? Jacinia?
That's how I say it in my head.
Same. So it says that the story of Iron Flame has been translated from Navarian into modern English. What do you think that means? What do you think that tells us?
I am so curious about that. I feel like that is telling us something very important. I think it means Jacinia survives all of this. And that maybe no one else does. I don't know. I feel like it's very damning. It's very concerning.
It is very concerning.
Yeah. It's a little eerie the way I don't know, maybe it's just the way I read it, but I was just like, this seems like we're in for a very devastating.
I kind of read it and I was like, uh-oh. But then I wasn't honestly too sure what to make of that.
Yeah, I find it interesting that it is her specifically who ends up writing about it. But then again, she kind of took Violet's place as like the person who was gonna work their way up to the top. So it does make sense that she would take on that role.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's something to pay attention to in all the coming books is all those excerpts, because they are very, very telling.
Oh, absolutely.
So in this book, we end up getting our Dame redemption arc. And
Yeah.
I was a little surprised because I thought it would happen. I didn't think it would happen this fast. Like
I thought he was going to just like sink completely into the like, rules are rules, Violet, and we cannot like,
Yeah.
but no, he's.
Well, I feel like he still is rules are rules in some ways. Like the whole reason he refused to read her mind the first time that Varish asked was because it was against the rules. He's like, no, you're in the middle of doing a interrogation that is like laid out from the school. This, you aren't like personally interrogating her. This is part of a class, and this is not part of the class. You can't just bring me in here. And so I was like, okay, like at that point I was like, okay, he's still same old Dane, yay.
I thought he was like looking for a reason not to.
Yeah, I think looking back on it, you can kind of see like, oh, okay, like he's not the person maybe we think he is, or like, I don't know. It's hard to say because like at first I liked him, and then like, you know, it's been a bit of a roller coaster with his character. And then it's like everyone just absolutely hated him because he was the worst. But apparently he didn't like the whole like I'll miss you thing. It was implied that he knew that his dad was sending her to her death essentially. And
well,
he said
what
no.
She thought after, yeah.
Yeah, and then therefore that's what the readers thought. But it turns out he was actually saying like, I'll miss you because I know our friendship can never be the same since you chose Xaden. I was like, that is heartbreaking.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? I feel like they're brewing.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy with his arc. I'm pleasantly surprised because I thought that he was going to become like one of Violet's villains, right? And I'm very pleased that he chose the correct side when it comes to the morals. I'm very pleased he didn't know his dad's plans, because it definitely looked like he was Mr. Evil, I'll do anything leadership tells me to do person. But he's not really. And yeah, he is very rule bound, right? But he's definitely got a moral compass, and that is a pleasant surprise. Yeah. I'm wondering with now how things have turned out with Xaden, if Violet and Dane are going to become closer, or if it'll again something will happen for them to go like this, because I think given how Violet feels towards Xaden, regardless of whether he's a Venin or not, I wonder if it's going to become one of those things where it's like we need to get rid of him because he's a Venin from Dane, and Violet's like, no, like maybe we can save him or something, you know?
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see how each of the characters react to that information. And one thing about like Dane's character as well, like just speaking to, like you said, his moral compass, is the fact that no one wanted him to go with them. Like everyone's kind of still like, dude, we hate you. We are not forgiving you for what you did, even though you like ended up saving Violet and stuff like that. Like they still aren't all chummy with him. And he's like the leader of their wing, and no one ever listens to him. He's like, do this. And Rhiannon's like, no.
I know. It's actually, it's actually kind of, I actually find that irksome for him because he is the wing leader.
Yeah. And he has like absolutely no respect from anybody. But he still goes. He still tries. He still helps every time they ask. And I'm like, that shows so much integrity that even when people are like still kind of kicking you, that you're still willing to be like, yeah, I'll pay my dues to earn your respect back.
I know. He's growing on me.
Hmm. I know. I'm like, oh, I don't dislike him anymore. What is this feeling? So I'm excited to see how he continues to progress as a character.
Me too. So then there's Miss Catriona. And
Hmm.
so we do discover that, her and Zayden were pretty serious. She hates Violet with a fiery passion.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on this?
I know that typically I hate when they pit girls against girls. I'm like, that is
Mm-hmm.
a very, very outdated trope. Like, we don't need this. I don't mind it in this case for a few reasons. One, it's not the main female like relationship. Most of the female relationships in the story are much more positive relationships. Like Violet and Rhiannon's relationship is amazing. Even Violet and Imogen are starting to get closer. Like all of the girls, if they are catty towards each other, it's because of like either a legitimate reason or like a competitive nature. It's not like this over a boy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Kat comes in and they have this very kind of roll your eyes boy or girls fighting over a boy thing, I am not as mad about it as I would be if that was like the main female interaction in a story.
Yeah,
So I think for
totally.
me, I'm okay. I think it added something different to the story, and it added a tension that was kind of intriguing to read about.
Yeah, I agree.
And I do like that, like how eventually they do end up respecting each other. Because as soon as we find out that it's really not about girls fighting over a boy, it's about girls fighting over power. Like
It
Xaden
is,
really,
ultimately.
like Xaden is not, well, Violet is fighting for Xaden because Violet loves Xaden, but Kat could give two flips if it's Xaden. He just
Mm-hmm.
happens to be the person who's kind of like, he's the Duke of
Yeah, he's
that
like
territory.
nobility, right?
Hmm.
And so
And
those
so,
two joining is like a power move.
so it's like, yeah, you can get mad that it's like girls fighting over a boy, but like when you really, really look at it, it's not. It's about
Not
a girl
really.
fighting for
It's
power.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
she's kind of a badass in a way.
Yeah, she is.
So I like her character, and I do like that they are learning to respect each other as professional fighters, I guess you
Yes.
could say.
Yeah. They are starting to.
So one part of the story that I just absolutely adored was anything to do with like the dragons and Andarna. Like I love when the Violet is talking to either of her dragons and just like the interaction between humans and dragons in general. And we find out some more things about the dragons, which is really cool because I love any little snippet like where we learn more and more about their world because they are so secretive. And we learn that their color comes from their lineage, but their tail comes from their like what they need, kind of like a rider's signet. And I thought that was really cool that they
Yeah,
have that
that
kind of
is super
connection.
cool.
And I couldn't remember if we knew what tail type Andarna was or if her tail hasn't changed yet. I was like, I don't remember hearing anything about her tail.
Well, yeah, she must not, because she's not a feather tail anymore,
Unless they
right?
don't lose their feather, because she's still an adolescent, so she's not an
Yeah.
adult dragon. So maybe she is still a feather tail until she becomes an adult dragon.
Hmm.
I don't remember hearing anything about her tail, and I don't
No,
know if it's just a detail I missed or not.
no, I don't remember either. Hmm.
But I think that her little attitude just adds like, because it's a book about war. It's not a funny subject. Like this is a very serious subject. And then on top of that, we have all these like really intense relationships happening. And then we have Andarna just being her little like
Little comic relief.
hilarious self. And she's not
So
even trying to be funny.
snarky. She's
Oh,
like
and
just in
like, we
such a
do not
bad
eat our
mood all the time.
allies.
Taryn's always in the background, like stopping her from trying to like kill all the sheep and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and kill all the griffins and
Yeah.
kill anything. And
Yeah.
then like at one point she like saves Violet by consuming somebody. And Taryn's just
Mhm.
like, did you eat him? Like, Andarna, stop eating everything.
She's so funny.
Oh,
Uh,
goodness. But she's growing and, like,
I feel sad for her though, because she didn't develop that muscle she needs to be able to carry a rider.
yeah,
That
I don't
is
know if
so
they've told
sad.
her that yet. I think she
I don't
thinks
think
she'll
so.
work up to it, which
Hmm.
at least she's flying now. And maybe, I mean, they don't know anything about her because we also find out that she is not a black dragon, as her scales would indicate. She just happens to want to be like Terran, so she dresses
She's
herself in
this.
black scales.
I have a few notes about this. So she's obviously the seventh breed of dragon that they didn't know
Hmm.
existed, basically, right?
Yeah.
So like, what breed is this? So it's so cool because she can, like, the way that they describe, or that her scales were described, like how she can like change color or blend into rock and stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. She obviously a very, very powerful species, maybe like a slightly superior species to the others, especially considering she was the key to the ward system and everything. And the fact that her egg was intentionally left in the um, hatching grounds so
Hmm.
that she could hatch at a very specific moment in time. So it's like
Well,
her.
yeah, because she chose when to hatch.
Mhm,
So the way that that was described, because she waited like what, like 650 years or something to
something crazy
hatch.
like that. Yeah.
And then she like heard about Violet essentially. And she's like, oh, that'll be my
Mhm.
rider. And then or my person. And then she
Yeah.
chose to hatch. So like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, and it almost sounded like the other dragons of her kind, like, left her there with this, like, role that she was supposed to play, and, like,
Hmm.
then they flew off somewhere, and, I'm wondering if they flew off to the Isles because the Isles keep being brought up, and I don't remember them in Fourth Wing. All of a sudden, there's these Isles, and they seem like a slightly more advanced culture because they were still trading with Poromil, and they like would trade silks
Mm.
and stuff like that. So they seem
Yeah.
like, and then they cut themselves off from Navarre when Navarre like did its like, well, I can't remember what they called it, but like when they combined and then put the wards up. So I feel like there's something going on there. And I wonder if that has to do with one theory is that maybe that's where Andarna's kind of family went off
Mm.
to. If they're not
Hmm.
extinct. Maybe they're extinct, but maybe they like escaped and went to the Isles. And then my second theory is that maybe the Isles has something to do with Zayden's mom.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I threw a lot at you there.
No, that's good. I was actually wondering about something else, and Darna. So, because we don't know if Violet's going to get a second signet or if it's just going to be like her original signet, but like amplified, because the signet, it depends on the rider, right? But
Hmm.
Andarna is special. And I'm just starting to wonder if Andarna and her powers are somehow going to be the key in neutralizing or healing like the venin problem.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Because the signet is because they even ask and she even asks Andarna, "Will I get a second signet?" And she's like, "Signets are based on you and your need. It's not
so
about me."
Violet needs Xaden to be cured from his venin
Hmm.
status. So I'm just wondering if somehow that's going to translate.
Yeah.
And yeah. Anyway, it's kind of
Y-
like a half-baked idea that I have sitting here, but I'm just like,
Yeah. I wonder if like the Venin were thinking, "Oh, if we get him to turn, then she'll turn to be with him," kind of thing. But then like the reverse will happen, and then she'll like develop a signet to save him instead. Them not like realizing that that could be a possibility.
yeah. But I'm just because I'm imagining, like, what if she's like calling down the lightning and it's like this massive thing, but instead of it being like lightning that's like burning everything, it's like lightning that's like going to the venom and then like reverting them back to humans or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because we know that her ability isn't lightning wielding. Her ability is to wield pure power.
Yeah.
And she chooses to wield it unbeknownst to herself. She chooses to wield it as lightning.
Comes out as lightning. Yeah.
But it could come out as anything. At least that's what I believe it's implying, is that it doesn't have to be the form of lightning. So I feel like there is so much more to her power that is untapped. And then as the stories progress, we're going to see her do some like things that we can't even imagine, because it's basically like raw magic.
Exactly. It's giving Dorian.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yes. Yeah. So I was like, well, then why couldn't it be? And if it's to the writer's need, well, she needs Xaden to be cured, right?
Yeah. There's so much.
I know.
I am so excited to see how this, and like, there's so many books left.
Oh, I know. Yeah, there's a lot that could happen. Let's talk about Soaring Gales.
Yes.
All right. So, Lilith, I have a question. Why, like, this was mentioned, like, specifically several times that she has, like, the bruised look under her eyes. And once I'd be like, well, she's just real tired and stressed. But they kept mentioning that. Did you have any thoughts about that?
I honestly just thought she was just incredibly tired and just like stressed out, knowing that her 3 children are on like the opposite side that she's kind of put herself on. But now that you mention that, like, it was mentioned so many times, and like usually when that happens, there's a deeper meaning. Yeah, I don't have any thoughts on it because I didn't really put the pieces together until you just like literally laid them for me. But yes, I agree that now that you're saying that, it does seem suspicious and that maybe she was up to something.
So another thing I have like all these like notes about General Sorengale, okay? So another thing I'm thinking about is, so Violet's hair. And then I'm also thinking about that excerpt about how General Sorengale was looking for a cure for the venom. So now I'm wondering, you know, if either she or their father, I'm thinking the father, if he became a venom, and if he, even if he's still alive.
Yeah, because I think as readers, we are told he had a heart attack, but that's kind of all we know.
We don't
about.
know that.
And they don't talk about people after they pass, or they're not supposed to. I think everyone breaks that rule, but yeah, so we have very, very little information on like the state of how he passed, kind of thing. So I think it's possible.
Well, because I'm just thinking venom drain life, right? What if he was a venom or became a venom and accidentally was draining Lilith whilst she was pregnant? Because they talk about how she was in a fever, but what if she wasn't in a fever? What if that was just what they put out there and told everybody?
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, how can she, like, so we find out that she like deeply, deeply loved her husband, right? Or loves her husband. And it is demonstrated very clearly that she will do anything to keep her children safe, or those she loves safe. So I was just kind of wondering.
My only pause would be at the very end when she sacrifices herself. She's like, it's okay because I'll get to see him.
Oh, right. Yeah. So maybe he is dead. But regardless of whether he's dead or not, if he was a venom when she was pregnant, that would explain why Violet's hair is drained, because like it seems like perhaps she was drained. Maybe that explains why she is like weaker and has the, you know, the disease that she has and stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that is an interesting theory, and it could definitely be, and we kind of speculated or like heard someone else's theory about that, but like it would definitely amp up that theory if the venom was Violet's father. That'd make it much more interesting.
Yeah, or even General Sorengale, but I feel like how could she possibly hide that? If they don't feed from the earth at all, do they show any signs?
I don't know if we have enough information on the venom to know like exactly how, because we know they have like the three or four different levels of venom. Because
Yep.
there's like the like ones that have just turned kind of thing, and then you kind of get up, and then like the sage is like seems like the most powerful, but then the general is like the actually the most powerful, and they had never seen them. So it's like I
Hmm.
don't know how they get up in rank. I don't know if we have that information. And I don't know at what point they're it sounds like when you're at the lowest level, you just start to get like that little red ring around your eye. But
Yeah.
that could be easily hidden. Like,
I
because I don't
mean,
even know how
yeah, like
prominent it is.
exactly. I'm just wondering, like, if when they every time they feed on the ground, if it's sort of
Mhm.
similar to like, the Twilight vampires. You know what I mean? Like when they feed, their irises turn whatever color depending on what they're eating. Do you know what I mean? Like I was just kind of
Yeah.
thinking about that. So,
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I guess
so another
I
thing I
don't
have, these are just like notes I made while I was reading. They're pretty unhinged. So,
know.
like I'm like, what if her mother was a Venin? Which I don't know. It just feels like unlikely because you'd think leadership would notice something is wrong. Like this
Yeah, you would
Venom.
think.
But if she was like, what if she inadvertently drained Violet when she was pregnant? Hence the hair, right?
Mhm.
Um, and because I'm just thinking, like, she was so strict and controlled all the time. Is that her personality, or does she need to maintain that type of control in order to control herself?
Mm. Yeah. No, that's a good
and
point.
and if she was a Venin, does that make Violet part Venin or only
Ooh.
only just weaker?
I like the idea that Violet's part venom through, like, birth.
Hmm.
That would be interesting.
I'm just looking at my notes here. Got to skip through that. Like I said, they're quite unhinged because I was just
Cool.
putting them down as I was reading. Then I realized why this might not work.
I love how theories progress as you, like, read. You're like, "What if this happens?" And then, like, another event in the story happens, and you're like, "Oh, that won't work, but then this could work."
Well, so Lilith's dragon remained bonded to her, and we know that when Xaden chose to do everything he needed to do in order to save Violet, right? He chose to
Mhm.
become a Venin. Gale was like devastated
Yeah.
by this choice. And I'm just so Lilith is still bonded to her dragon, but
Yeah.
if Lilith didn't like pursue the Venin lifestyle, we could say,
Yeah.
does that mean that it makes it like her dragon's like okay, like maybe they have this, we don't know like what her and her dragon talked about, right? Or like
Mhm.
what their relationship was like. So it's just like all these question marks, and now she's gone. So it's like, ah, come on.
Yeah. No, I wonder if, like, she'll have a journal or something that Violet will find in her office, or I feel like we'll get more information about Lilith's backstory in some way.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I thought was interesting about Lilith was that she was giving everybody a choice when they were like deserting, basically.
Mhm.
She gave them the
Yeah.
choice. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if that was just more like she's not 100% like on board with this war. Like it's not what she like how the events have kind of unfolded isn't what she would have chosen. She just did everything at like every decision she made was what she thought was best for her children and to keep them safe. But then it's
Hmm.
like it's taken her down this path where she's like, I don't agree with what is going on, but I've made my bed.
Hmm.
So I want other people to have the freedom to get out because like I don't even believe in what we're doing, but now I'm here.
So that being said, that she will do like everything for her children, if that was what all of her motivations were, then the fact that she pulled Violet out of going into the scribe quadrant and thought that going into the Dragon Rider quadrant was like the safest option for her.
Yeah.
Says a lot about like what is going on in the scribe quadrant and like what dangers there could be there.
Well, yeah, because she knew that Violet would figure out the answer eventually, and that she would be killed in this scribe quadrant for knowing that. Or for, not that she'd be killed for knowing it, because she eventually would have been told it, because she was training to become the head of the scribes and take over that position. So she would have been given that information, expecting to be okay with it. And her mom knew she would never be okay with knowing that information, not doing anything about it. So she's like, if she's in the Riders quadrant, maybe she also felt like I could be there with her, because her mom is also a rider. Because then it's like, I can actually have eyes on her and be in the same general area as her. And plus she had that favor with Xaden. So she's like, I can call in that favor and I know she'll be safe for the first year.
I just really enjoyed that she turned out not to be evil. That's all.
Yes, that was lovely. Completely not what I was expecting. But
see, her name Lilith was totally a red herring.
It was a red herring. I was bamboozled by the name. Another cool thing about the Soaring Gales is we actually get all three siblings reunited. And it wasn't the most happiest of reunions at first, and they are doing their little bickering sibling thing throughout, but it was really nice to see them get to work together and bond in their own little way.
Yes.
I really was happy with Mira joining them.
Yeah, me too. I was a little concerned, but no, they all have very good moral compasses. I was very sad though that Brennan and his mom, they never got to.
Yeah.
Even
I think I was going to say in the very, very end, when she was like sacrificing herself, I think he finally was like, oh, okay, she's not evil. So it's like, they had like a split second, I think, where they, gazed into each other's eyes and felt the love.
So sad. But yeah, though.
It's so sad that they didn't really have a chance to properly reunite.
Like resolve their differences.
We don't often swear on this podcast, or we try not to. But I have to say, every time I hear the word or the name Jack Barlow, it automatically, forever and always will have the F word as his middle name. And it says it in the book several times. And I'm like, every time his name came up, I just like inserted that in, because it's like, that is now his middle name. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Okay. Him coming back was a big WTF moment for me.
The biggest. I was like, jaw to the floor.
Yeah. It's like, no. But then he like saved Violet. So I thought, oh, maybe like when Nolan put him back together, he was like, let me just put you back together a little differently.
That would have been nice.
Right?
That's unfortunately not what happened.
No.
Yeah, it was so jaw-dropping that he returned. And then all of a sudden he's like got this like redemption arc of like, oh, maybe he came back and he like learned from his, misdoings, and he's like, oh, I got a second chance at life. I'm not going to squander it. And I was like, this is a little fishy, because at the very same time as Jack's little redemption arc was peaking up, so was Dane's. And I'm like, this is odd that the two people that were kind of like really disliked in the first novel are having these like redemption arcs at the same time. But it was like a little trickery, because obviously Jack was like a freaking Venom the whole time.
Yes.
Why did they bring him back to the school knowing he was a Venom? I don't understand.
But did everybody know he was a Venom though? So you think
leadership
that like
knew he was Venom?
So
I think so.
So what the heck is going on here?
Like, I understand them keeping him alive to try and cure him, because like that was their goal, was like, oh, we can use
He's the
this,
test
because he was
subject.
Venom before he was struck down by the
What?
tower. He
What?
became Venom. He became a Venom when him and Violet had their combat fight. When they did their fight on the mats. He became
Oh.
Venom just before that fight because he was trying to beat her. I don't remember. Maybe he does beat her. I don't remember. But yeah, that's when he became Venom. So when he died, he was already a Venom, or when he quote unquote died, because he didn't die. And so I think they were like, this is an opportunity for us to use him as an experiment to see if we can cure or suppress the venom in
So
him.
when he died, that's when they found out he was a Venom?
I don't know when leadership found out he was a Venom. I just know he was a Venom before that point.
I just had a thought. But
What is
we
it?
have to wait till we get to the Venom section to talk about it.
Okay. It is coming soon. But yeah, I am baffled why they let him return to the school. I feel like they should have just kept him locked up in the healer's quadrant where he was being held. And then a lot of this, all these problems that we had would not have been there if they just kept him locked up. Because, like, why would you release a known venom into your school? It doesn't make any sense. But then if they hadn't, we wouldn't have what I think is the twist ending of the book. Like, yes, there is the twist ending at the very end with Zayden, but like, I feel like I kind of saw that coming more. This, I absolutely did not see coming. Like, you could have told me like, oh, there's this crazy thing that happens, and I would have been like, no, you're lying to me because this is so out of left field. But the fact that he ended up like Jack ended up being a venom, and then he ends up sacrificing his dragon to dampen the flame on the iron flame ball that was holding the wards together. It was just shocking beyond belief.
Okay, so let's talk about Bade for a second, his dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Why were Bade's eyes milky? Is it because he was being like, why? Like, why? Do you know why?
Oh, I
Because
don't
they
know
were
why, but I
saying
wonder if it. Yeah, I forgot about that detail,
they
but they
were
do say that.
opaque. Yeah.
I wonder if it had something to do with the fact that he was no longer in control and that Jack was now controlling him.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
wonder
like
if that
that's
kind of
kind of what I was
signifies.
thinking. Something along those lines.
But that's a good sign to note, because then if like that is what's happening, then they can kind of figure out who else is a venom by looking at their dragon's eyes and seeing
Mm-hmm.
if other dragons are getting that.
Yeah. Dragon
Mm.
cataracts.
Yeah, poor dragons. Oh,
Jeez.
I feel bad for them. It's like they trusted the humans. They bonded with them in order to like join forces so humans could help them survive. And now some of them are like turning their backs on them. I mean, like, yeah, the dragons
Humans are
can kind of be
generally the
jerks, but
worst.
yes, that is very true. But it
Wow.
also, do you remember when Violet finally sees Nolan and they have a conversation, he's like, mending souls is really tiring or something like that. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I wonder whose soul he's mending. Like, I thought he meant it literally, but even so, like, I was like, something's going on with him. Like, there's going to be a big reveal revolving around this Nolan stuff. And yeah, it was the Venom soul, like Jack's Venom soul that he was trying to mend. And I was like,
Yeah,
that
so
tracks.
but that being said, like, does that now mean that Zayden's soul is broken?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess that does give us another
So
clue that it has to do
yeah.
with your soul when you become Venom.
Yeah. So like, okay, so are the souls now fractured? Like, does becoming a
Mm.
Venom actually fracture your soul? It's not just like a physical thing?
Yeah, because if it's like your soul is fractured, can you come back from that? Like, is that something that can be healed?
Maybe by like, I don't know, some raw power.
Maybe. I mean, if anything's going to heal a soul, raw power seems like the right source.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's the Jack storyline was incredible. I hated it so much that I loved it, and I wouldn't change it, even though I would change everything about it.
He's just a villain through and through.
Yeah.
um, so I see here it says, why did he save Violet? Well, he saved Violet because he's a Venin and the Venin want her, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that does make sense. But like at the time you're like, oh,
No, at the
I
time.
guess it makes you think like, oh, maybe he really is good. And then he's all like,
Yeah.
oh, you saved my life by dropping a tower on me, therefore now I'm saving yours. And she's like, it doesn't make sense. Like I feel
That's
like
why I was like, when they put him back together, they like put some niceness into him.
yeah, like I think it was definitely a situation where like as readers we were supposed to start to feel like, oh, maybe he's being changed in a good way. But like just to turn it all around and
Yeah.
give us a whiplash.
Yes. So let's talk about the Venin now.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up Venin, and did you know that the definition of it is venom? It's the French word for venom.
Oh, like poison.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
mean, they poison the land,
they do.
kind of in a
And
sense.
I just want to say that, like, Violet is a poison aficionado.
Oh,
So I think just the fact that they're called Venin and the fact that Violet is so good with poisons, I just think that's like another hint that she's the key to solving the Venin problem.
yeah, because I mean, venom has anti-venom. So
Exactly.
maybe there's anti-venom. I mean, they're
Venin.
already partway
Yeah,
there
anti-venin. Yeah.
because they have concocted that serum that takes away like the bond. So it's like they're
Mm-hmm.
making strides. I mean, I hated that,
Mm-hmm.
but they are making strides that could lead to a good outcome.
I
Very,
hope
very
so.
interesting. I like that you put those pieces together.
And
I
go ahead.
when I was reading about the Venom, I was like immediately like brought back to Vampire Academy. Have you seen that?
No.
It's like a book series. They turned it into a movie and then they did a TV show. And it's like obviously about vampires, and there's different types of vampires, but then there's like the vampires that wanted more power, so they turned into Strigoi, and they're like the evil vampires. And it just very much reminded me, like the Venom give off Strigoi vibes very much because they're like the evil version of something, and they get
Oh,
there
I
by
see.
like kind of like selling their soul in a way. So,
Wow.
but you haven't seen it, so maybe
I
someone else out
haven't.
there will have.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'll forgive you.
I just want to mention real quick Taryn's previous writer, Nowlin.
Mm-hmm. I know it
So I
was
think it was
mentioned, but I can't
Brennan.
remember.
Yeah, so I think it was Brennan said that he was lost, but he didn't say he was dead. I'm just wondering if he was turned
Oh.
into a venin.
Maybe. I wouldn't Taryn know if his rider was
Yeah.
dead? So you would think that
But Taryn holds
he
back
wouldn't bond with.
information.
He does, but like, why would he bond? I guess he never meant to bond with Violet. He only bonded with Violet because Violet saved Andarna. But yeah, I am surprised that I like that theory. I'm just wondering how it would work logistically. Can dragons bond to more than one human? But maybe if he's a venin, it's like, I don't know.
Well, maybe the bond was completely corrupted, right? Like, just wondering.
No, that would be interesting because we know that like Jack stayed bonded with his dragon, even though he kind of like broke the bond in a way, but he was still able to ride his dragon and talk to his dragon.
Yeah, there's something wrong with Bade, though.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe Taryn broke the bond knowing. Like
Because dragons can
maybe
break
the dragons
bonds.
can break the bond
Mm-hmm.
but maybe Jack found a way to kind of like take control before his dragon could break the bond between them. But you would think there'd be, because we know that there are more venom out there, because Jack implies that they're like walking around Navarre,
Yep.
like in and amongst people. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're all riders. They could be from
No.
different quadrants.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you would think if there's ones from the riders quadrant that either their dragons would unbond with them, like break the
So
bond.
I'm just wondering, like, if you're a venom, if you become a venom and then the bond is broken, will you survive? Because as a human, you can't, right?
Right. I'm guessing yes.
You're thinking that if the bond is broken while you're a venom, that you survive that breaking bond.
Yes, because Jack survived killing his dragon.
Oh, right. Yeah. So maybe he didn't have the bond with Bade anymore, and that's why Bade's eyes were opaque. Maybe they were like dosing Bade with something.
Oh, maybe. I definitely think there's more going on.
There's more to that with Bade
Mm-hmm.
and how Jack like retained control over him for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting to see. The more we learn about anything to do with like any of the culture or the world, like the dragon world or Poromil or like anything, I get so excited. And I'm wondering if they mentioned that one of the people, I think it was Salone, was fighting on the mats, had red-rimmed eyes. And I thought nothing of it when reading it. But then thinking back, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that person's a venom. Now I'm going to be like, in the next book, in a year or whenever it comes out, I'm going to be like, are you a venom? Are you a venom? Are you like no one? I'm not going to trust anybody.
Can you imagine if you've just been like crying and your eyes are red rimmed and everyone's like, you're a venom killer.
You're a venom.
I've just been crying.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Man.
Well, and that's the thing. Are people going to start turning on each other? Like this brings like a whole nother level of tension.
Well, we have to kind of wonder about venom in general, because just because they're venom doesn't necessarily mean they're all evil, right? The venom we've run into are evil, but what if they're not all evil? Like, I mean, we've seen it lots in other books where vampires, which are evil, you think, there's lots of good ones, right? You know, is it the same thing? Are we just seeing like the evil ones, or what we're perceiving to be evil? Or are we going to find something out about the humans that makes the humans seem evil towards the venom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I feel like and we'll talk about it a bit more later, but like, I feel like we're learning a lot more about the different territories and how perhaps if the main perspective was from someone in a different territory, we would feel very differently about like how things are being built up. So I think you are correct in that, like, there's a chance that not all venom are evil. Like, obviously, there are some that are super power hungry, but, like, do they need to drain power to keep living? Like, why are they continuing to take more and more territory? Is it out of need? Because, like, once you start, you have to keep draining things to, like, maintain a lot, like, to keep living? Or is it just there's a small group of them who are super power hungry and are kind of, but then in the barrens, maybe there's like happy, lovely venom who are just doing their thing. We have absolutely no idea what's going on in the barrens because we've never explored that area.
It is kind of evil that they have to kill things in order to survive, but I guess so do we. When you think about it, like, so do humans. It's just done differently, right?
Yeah. And maybe there are venom who live in the barrens who have figured out a different way. If that is something they need in order to survive, maybe like you said, like with the vampires, how like the Cullens would feed off of animals instead of people. Like maybe they've discovered a way that they can maintain their lifestyle without impacting other people.
Maybe they have farms. Like, seriously,
we have no idea because
right?
it's just such a mystery.
We don't know anything about them. So
But I kind of like that, like, we don't know anything about them yet, because then it just means that there's still so much more to discover.
totally.
Oh, I think it's important to discuss the dreams that Violet has been having. And at first I thought they were just dreams, but then I'm like, these seem more like the Venom are dream walking in her
hmm
dreams and like
hmm
actually interacting with her in the dreams and controlling her dreams. I'm like, this is, yeah, like, is this a power that the Venom has to like, because he even like when they see the Venom in person, it's like they refer to these dreams. So I'm like, this, if it's not a dream, it's like dream walking
hmm
is my thought on it.
Oh, I completely agree with that. 100%.
Yeah. And then like Zayden apparently is also having these dreams, or are one of them seeing the other's dream? Like, is Violet seeing Zayden's dreams, or is Zayden seeing Violet? Like, I don't, because he's like, oh, at the end, the Venom he was fighting was like, I told you in the dream that you would change for me. But that's also what the Venom said to Violet in her dream, or that you would
Right.
change for love. Sorry.
And they're so connected. So it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
know if that's her just seeing his dreams or not and not realizing it. Yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah. I think the dreams are very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And or maybe it has to do with like a signet of hers that is manifesting. I don't know. Maybe she can dream. I don't know. I just think the
Maybe she
dreams are
can
very
see others' dreams.
interesting.
Oh, man.
That would be cool.
I wonder. Oh, no, maybe nah, that's probably not, but I'll say it anyway. What if because of their bond, she has a little bit of like intrinsic powers where she's like, whoops, I've slipped into your dream. Like, I can see your dream now. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that would be cool if like their bond kind of meant that they could like borrow each other's power a little bit. We haven't really seen that, but I am starting to notice that sometimes things are happening that are just so subtle you don't notice it until it's brought up even more, and then you go back and you're like, oh, okay. The like breadcrumbs are very fine in this book.
Yeah, they are. But I think we just have, like you said, so far to go because it's going to be like a 6-book series. So we're just at the kind of very beginning here. Like the first fourth wing was to kind of introduce us to the world and their relationship. And now we're in the thick of the story, right?
Yeah. I'm like just at the beginning of it too. And it feels like there's so much action already being so early on in the story. But that just makes me excited for what's to come. Speaking of Zayden's second signet, he always would tell Violet throughout the story to put her shield up. So he's like, even around me, keep your shields up, keep your shields up, always keep your shields up. And it was implied that it was to help her train to be able to stop Dane from reading her thoughts if he ever got a hold of her. And I think that that is valid, and that definitely had something to do with it. But once we found out what his second signet was, I started to wonder if perhaps it has more to do with him wanting her to keep his shield up around him so he can't read her intentions. And again, going back to like, he wants her to have that control.
I think it could be both.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said earlier, he's really into consent, and maybe he like knows she wouldn't necessarily consent to him reading her intentions, like gives him it's a violation, right?
So we kind of mentioned that there's been a few different aspects of this book that people are, I don't know if offended is quite the right word, but like are not happy with. They dislike.
Yeah.
And one of the things I saw quite often was that people were not happy with the world building, and they thought that Iron Flame lacked world building. And I just respectfully disagree. I thought that not only is this only book 2 of 6, so it's like there is so much that we are still going to discover, and we can't just like get everything all at once. That would be overwhelming and way less fun. But also, like, we learned so much about so many different things. Like, I personally felt like I learned so much more about the world than, I don't know, maybe I'm just not used to reading fantasy books that have like really epic world building. So maybe in comparison to other books, it feels like it's lacking. But for me, I felt like I learned a lot about the world.
Yeah, I think we're being, well, yeah, we did, because we're no longer in the college, right? In this book.
Mm-hmm.
So the, mm, I can kind of see where people are coming from, but at the same time, I didn't even notice really because
Mm-hmm.
the story was pretty fast paced, I felt. So
Yeah.
I think like we did learn definitely a lot more about the different cultures that we had no idea about in Fourth Wing. We learned a lot more about the dragons, um, and their culture. There's just like a lot going on. We are starting to learn more about the Venin, which I think in the next book, we're going to learn a lot more about the Venin. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I think that like, I think if there had been a lot of intensive world building in this book is already over 600 pages long. It would have
Mm-hmm.
been too long and it would have had to have been cut. And we wouldn't have had necessarily this cliffhanger ending. It would have been the cliffhanger ending in maybe the third book if we had all the
Yeah.
world, that type of world building. I think we had enough world building for what the story, where the story's at currently,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. But
Yeah. And I think that also perhaps because we're learning about so many different aspects, like so many different cultures, like we have the Navarian culture, which we learned is very like collective, but not collective as in like we work together necessarily. Like they almost make it sound like collective as in like a bad thing. Like people can't keep their individual identities. Like people are losing their languages and losing their cultural customs and stuff like that to fit in and be like one group of Navarian people. And it's very like
mhm,
united, but in a lacking diversity kind of way. And then we have the Pormish culture that we also learn about, which is much more like individualistic, but again, not in like we don't come together individualistic, more in an individualistic as in we respect each individual group's language and culture and traditions, but we still work together. And then we, as you mentioned, we also have the dragon culture. We also have the Venin culture. So it's like that's a lot of different things to learn about. So it's like we're
mhm,
getting a little bit of information about each one, but
mhm.
when you have so many things to explore, it's hard to, explore it all without, like you said, the book being unmanageable to read.
Yeah, so I think we had just enough information about each culture to keep the story moving forward at the pace that it was being told at. Um,
Mhm.
I never felt so. The only time I think I'd really complain about world building is if when you're reading about the story and you don't have like a good solid sense of your environment around you or how your character should be navigating through it. And like I say, I
Mhm.
think because this is told in like first person, right? We're seeing it through Violet's eyes. I think it might be like we can only get as much world building as Violet is seeing anyways.
Yes.
Um and it doesn't, if it was told in a different point of view, I think the world building could be done a little differently. Maybe we'd get more information, but we can't really because we're restricted to Violet's eyes.
Mhm. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for us to know more about things because that's not where she's at in her story. Like,
Hmm.
no, that's a very good point. I also really like that we are learning about these mysterious isles off the coast, just because I think they are going to play a major part in the story at some point. And they seem just very luxurious and like another really interesting culture that we will eventually get to hear about.
Hmm.
And I also thought it was interesting how when they end up going to the palace in Pormil, I don't remember what the city's name is, but they go to this palace and it's like very, very extravagant. And they make a point of noting that it was built based on aesthetics, not based on like security. Like everything in
Hmm.
Navarre is built to outlast an army. Like they are, like they have a war college. Like everything is has to
Military
do with
and
war, military. It's built
yeah.
to last. It's not built to be pretty. But then you go over into Poromil, sorry, and you get these buildings that are built purely because they're beautiful. And I
Mhm.
feel like that speaks so much to just the different mindsets of these two cultures. And I
Mhm.
think it is supposed to be there to tell the reader something important
Mhm.
about the different cultures.
I'm just wondering if maybe Navarre are kind of the bad guys at this point. Do you know what I mean?
That
And we
is
don't
exactly what I
realize
was
it,
implying.
right? Yes. We don't realize it because it's sort of like if we were to get somebody who grew up like in Throne of Glass in Morath, right?
Mhm.
And then they're
Yes, no,
like,
that is
right? And then they're going out and they're like, "Oh, the world is beautiful." Like, what is
mhm.
this?
No, I
Yeah.
am starting to wonder if that is exactly what is happening. And not only that, I think we get another clue to kind of support that in that these isles that I keep mentioning, they continued to trade with Poromil, but not with Navarre. They cut off their
Mhm.
trading.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm wondering if that's where it's headed. And I think that these could be little clues that we're getting the perspective of the good people, but the good people in the evil zone. And maybe the
Yes.
Venom aren't the big bad after all. Like we kind
Yeah.
of mentioned earlier, that this could be
Mhm.
all turned around at some point. And I personally, I've never read a book like that from that, like where you end up being actually in enemy territory from the beginning. I think
Yeah,
that
and
could
that
be
you
an
were actually
interesting twist.
born in enemy territory and believe that you're on the right side. But I
Hmm.
mean, as the story progresses, it's kind of like they're shifting away from that, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe they'll shift completely and all of a sudden Navarre is going to be the bad guy. Which look at the way I'm sorry, but look at the way they handle things in the Riders Quadrant, like killing off like people before they can even cross the parapet. Like that's so ridiculous.
Yes.
And they even point that out. Like the Griffin Riders are like, that's,
Yeah.
and Violet's like, oh, yeah, like, when you put it that way,
You
it is
don't
kind of
kill
crazy.
everybody?
Like they don't even get a chance. Like a gust of wind blows you off. Like that could have been like the best rider in your entire quadrant and it was just
Hmm.
unlucky. Like it's really stupid, right? So
Yeah. Well,
it,
and if like a dragon doesn't pick you, you're kind of like, that's the end of the road. And they're like, oh, if you don't get picked by a griffin, you just go pick something else to do instead.
well, yeah, and like, oh, we jump off the cliff and then we swim to shore or
And then
whatever.
we
What or we fall
just
off
pick
the
something
cliff.
else.
What happens when you
Yeah.
fall? Oh, we swim to shore and we go into different career. Violet's like, huh? It's like, yeah, what a novel idea. Maybe this culture is a little more advanced than yours and not so barbaric. Like,
Yeah. No, exactly. I think there's a
so
lot of things that are
because
pointing
there's
in that
definitely like
direction.
little seeds being dropped where Violet's kind of like having her eyes kind of opened that the way that they've been doing things in Navarre are maybe not the best. So
Yeah.
like
A
it
little
might maybe
questionable.
it's gonna be taken like because when you look at like the Basgiath War College, it's like it's a dark, hardcore place where you're just struggling to fight and survive. And so I really appreciated that palace and like how like she was noticing the glass doors and she was just like stunned by the beauty of them. So I'm gonna go with that theory that it turns out like
Hmm.
Basgiath and Navarre and there's something maybe they're the bad guys, right? I'm gonna go with that because I like that theory. We'll see
Yeah.
how it
Well,
actually
and
turns out. But
the whole fact that they like put up wards and are keeping people out,
mhm.
like that doesn't seem nice. And they're like, well, we gave people a year to decide to drop everything and move here. It's like, what about the people who can afford to drop everything within a year? Or like, there's so many reasons that people can't just move to an entirely different part of a continent, especially if you only give them a 1 year time frame. And then
Mhm.
after that, it's like, sorry, no, you're cut off. You can never be behind our safe
Yeah,
bubble.
you're an enemy now, essentially.
Hmm. Well, yeah, not only are you cut off, like we are waging war against you. Like,
Mhm.
that is just not a healthy mindset,
To say the least. Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Mm,
I feel like it's headed in that direction. Navarre is maybe the
mhm.
bad guy.
I think so too. I think that would be cool. I also really enjoyed the introduction of an entirely new magic system with the ruins. I thought that was really
Yes.
cool to kind of expand on because we don't know a lot about the magic. Like, we know that there's the signet power, we know there's lesser magic where they can like
Mhm.
make their quills have ink and stuff like that, close doors, whatnot. But now there's
Mhm.
like this entirely new kind of branch of magic that was considered like levels the playing field because
Mhm.
how powerful it is, so much so that they actually banned it, which again, oh, you don't
Mm.
want people to have magic that can compete with yours? That
Mm.
sounds evil and like you are power hungry and don't
Yeah.
wanna have to, like, prove yourself on an evil playing field.
Mhm.
Not something nice people would do.
There's there's just a few hints about Oh dear.
Mm, and I also like that the poor meal students seem to be better at the ruins. So it's not like, oh, our side is good at everything and the other side's like inferior in all these different ways. Like, they don't get signets. Their mounts are like lesser than. And it's like then this new magic comes in and they like dominate it.
Mhm.
I just enjoyed that.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah, I'm starting to feel more excited about the next book. I was so choked at the way this one ended. Not like I explained to you earlier, and I want to make it clear.
Mhm.
I'm not choked like I don't want to read this story anymore. I'm just like I'm choked for Violet. And
Yeah.
for most of all, not even for Violet, for Scale. Gale, however you're
Yeah.
supposed to say her name. I felt like her agony when she was like, I chose you. I was like, oh, poor
Mhm.
Scale. Like, seriously.
And that's like such a point of pride for the dragons because like every time Violet second guesses herself, Taryn's like, I chose you. Stop being a baby.
Yeah, like,
Like,
remember,
you,
I chose
yeah.
you.
So I think it's like incredibly insulting to the dragon when their human turns out to be not the person they thought they were, or like not as strong as they thought they were. Like, I think that's like a real gut blow for the dragon. And they're just like the biggest insult you could give a dragon is like to disappoint them with your
Hmm.
actions.
Yeah, so I just want to know more about why the dragons don't like the venom, hate them. Like, I just want to know. I want to know
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the dragons are really against the venom, I do kind of mean I feel as though that is telling us that, like, they maybe are mostly evil, but then again, we don't know a lot about the dragons, and they can be kind of jerks and very unwilling to try new things, perhaps? I don't know
I
how
mean,
to
you
word
look
it
at them
exactly,
wrong and
but
they torch you. So, I mean, that's
yeah.
pretty intense.
Mhm.
But
And maybe they also just don't like that they make the wyvern. Which
yeah,
I would be like, insulted by that too, if, like, I was a dragon and they're trying to make, like, a version of me, an eviler version of me that they can
seems kind of
control.
like it seems kind of like an abomination, kind of.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's more that like, that aspect of it, but I'm sure we'll find out eventually.
Yeah.
Mhm. So we've mentioned quite a few times that there is a lot of hate for this book online. I think there is equally as much love for the book, but, unfortunately, as the world works, typically the hate for things rises above and is heard a little bit louder. And I think that like we've like touched on quite a few of things already, but I think it's easy to forget that there's so much information that we are given that you can get like lost in the details. So lots of people are like, "Oh, there's like plot holes and this and that." Is like, with this amount of information, perhaps you've forgotten things along the way, and it might seem like a plot hole. And either one, you have forgotten, or perhaps maybe even is a plot hole because we haven't gotten the answer yet. Because
Mm-hmm.
if we got the answer too early, it would like ruin parts of the story. So I think it's just too early. Like the second book in a 6-book series, I feel like it's just too early to
Yeah.
be saying things like that.
I didn't mind it. I thought it
Mm-hmm.
was a good story. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered, not necessarily because they're plot holes, but just because, like, you can't necessarily answer all of the questions in this book. Like I say, this to me felt very much like a bridge book. It was like leading us
Mm-hmm.
from the starting point into the next one. It felt very much like a setup book. So we'll see if it turns out to be true. But
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. And I was expecting that going into this one. I feel like there's like kind of a formula with long series where you have like books that are more, I don't know, maybe like action packed, you could say, or they just have different feels as you're reading them. And some are more like packed with information to get you to the next stage. Like you said, the bridges. And I was expecting this to be a bridge book, like just setting us up. So I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much action there was in the book because thought it was going to be a little bit on the dry side because the first one was quite action packed. I was like, oh, this one's going to be a lot more dry and just leading us into something. So I was like, sweet, we're getting so much more than I thought we would.
it felt like there was just something big constantly happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually surprised at how much happened in the book. It was a very dense book with info. I thought it was very like, okay, so when people are saying like there was a lack of world building, I just want to say like this book to me seemed like it was an extremely densely information packed book.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself having to reread passages to like really understand the nuance of what was happening in like Navarian politics or whatever. Like I found like myself having to be like, okay, what does that mean again? And rereading it. And that I don't often do that when I'm reading. So um I think also though there is a lot of anger towards the author regarding some things she said, which I actually haven't had time to look up.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are sort of putting the story aside to sort of take aim at her. So, um, so I
Yeah,
can't really comment on that. I haven't
mhm.
looked it up.
Yeah, I looked it up and I personally like to keep like politics out of my reading. And I'm like, part of me wonders, and I don't know if this is what people are doing, but part of me wonders if people disagree with the statement she's saying, if that is impacting their perception of the book, if they're finding reasons to dislike it because, like, maybe they ordered it before and then some
Mm,
statements came out and they're like, oh, I don't like her politics. So now I'm going into this not liking her, and therefore I'm going to find reasons to hate this book.
could
But
be.
I
I
don't know.
mean, sometimes, whether it be a writer or an artist, if you really disagree with the way that their worldviews, it can stain your experience whilst enjoying or not enjoying the art or the story. So I think
Mhm.
it's like a fair judgment to make. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Yeah, I just wonder if people would have different opinions about the book if the politics never came into it, I guess. But
Maybe. I mean, maybe these
we
people are already disliking how the book was, and that only fanned the flames, so to
yeah.
speak. Who knows?
I mean, ultimately, whether or not you enjoy the book or not, it's a personal opinion, and you are welcome to whichever
Yeah.
opinion you like. And if you didn't enjoy it, then yeah, don't read it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't encourage people to do things that don't bring them joy. So if you found this one terrible and you didn't finish it or whatever, then by all
Oh,
means,
I
don't put
feel a book
yourself
has
through
to
it.
be pretty unenjoyable to DNF, but
Yeah.
if you DNF'd it, then move on because it ain't for you.
Yeah, and that is totally okay. But I
That is
personally
totally
really
valid.
enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was kind of it for today. I feel like we discussed all of our thoughts we kind of had regarding
Mhm.
this book. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.
Bye bye for now, and we'll see you again.